first workshops on the summit, but I hope not to disappoint and maybe share at least one decent idea during the course of the morning. And I'm very conscious of the fact that I am in a room full of experts and colleagues who, in many cases, know as much, if not more, about social media than I do. And really the purpose of the workshop today is to be able to give a vision of where I believe we are heading from the point of view of our business model when it comes to social media measurement. And a lot of that is really based on two things. Number one, how I have been looking at the evolution of social media measurement from an operational and customer point of view within my own organization. But in addition to that, my growing belief, and I'm sure many of you share that belief, in the social media enterprise, which is basically every company becoming social media ready in every department, in every unit, across the C-level and so on. So what I'm going to be showing and sharing with you today, and I hope you will interrupt, talk, ask as many questions as you would like, is quite heavily opinionated. Might be a little bit of a departure from your normal workshop, which is usually more instructive perhaps, but we're all at a level of seniority where this is really a discussion about an opinion, an argument which I'm going to be making. I'd love for you to agree or to disagree. So let's take it from there. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Mazen Nahawi. I'm the president of News Group International. We're a company based in Dubai. We have offices in Washington, in London, Cairo, Baghdad, Amman, Beirut, and a few other places. We're roughly 400 people operating in 41 countries. That's people on the ground in each country, not freelancers and so on. And we have a group structure where we have 5 companies who are operating within each practice area. So we have Media Watch, which is a media monitoring and press clipping company. Social Eyes for our social media. Many of you are aware of it because we actually work with you. So let's talk about today's agenda. I'm going to quickly touch upon the current business models which are quite prevalent when it comes to social media measurement today. I want to discuss with you and hear from you what you feel are the strong points and the weak points within that current structure. And then I'm going to be making what hopefully will be a good point of discussion, and that is, even though things aren't particularly bad right now, we are actually facing a very dangerous situation. One which I believe is about to recreate a culture of mediocrity when it comes to social media measurement. And while we have not gotten to that point yet, I believe there are a number of factors which are coming together, which are going to force us to move and to adapt and to change in a relatively short period of time to make sure that we do not fall within that trap of mediocrity. And then I'm going to say, well, how do we solve that problem? How do we move to that next level? And I'll be giving you a vision of what I believe is one of the right ways to do it. It might not be the only way to do it, but what I believe will be an effective solution. So, correct me if you feel I'm wrong. Shout, put up your hand. But these are what I believe are the 4 existing business models when it comes to social media measurement, and the 5th one we'll talk about in a moment. You've got the most basic, what I call the people reading model. Literally, people in a press clipping agency or a social media agency, or even on the client side, 1 or 2 or 4 people, maybe a little bit more, young people, people who've worked in the media intelligence business, actually going on and reading individual posts, individual conversations in a purely manual form. There's no widespread nature to it. There's no support from automation or a service provider. It's literally very limited and very manual in scope. Believe it or not, I see this all the time. I'm not sure if you do, but I still continue to see that all across the industry. Second one is what I call the tweet deck model, where people who are perhaps staffed with younger people or college grads, they take all of the free tools which are available out there, such as TweetDeck and so on, and there are hundreds of them today. And they try to use that automation and try to surmise all of the data and the insight that they need using free tools. Again, not particularly great, not particularly bad. It is what you make of it. That too is very widespread. Then you've got the software as a service model, which I think is probably the most prevalent from a financial and a billing point of view, which is basically a technology company. I don't want to say masquerading, but masquerading as a media company, providing large-scale, fully automated social media capture and what they believe is automated sentiment or automated measurement and analytics. And we'll talk about that in more depth in a moment. Then what I call the hybrid model, which is combining social media analytics, large-scale automated capture, and then filtering that data down from hundreds of thousands or millions of conversations to a much smaller universe of data and having that analyzed by human beings. And there are a lot of fantastic blog posts coming out in the past few months talking about analysis 1.0 or human analysis 1.0. I think Richard wrote a very good one about that, or he retweeted one, I don't know, I saw it somewhere, about how human analysis remains the main driver of good analytical thinking, but there's a integration between that and the large amount of data which is automatically being captured and filtered. We'll talk later about the next generation model, which I'm going to propose, and would love to hear from you on whether you agree or not. So I'm going to focus on two: the software as a service model and the hybrid model. Until now, am I losing anybody? Do you generally agree with that as a representation of the market? Florian, do you think that's a fair assessment? Where would your company be? Number 4, okay. Anybody who would disagree? Richard?
I think it's very fair. I'm intrigued by the number 5.
Okay, well, let's start working towards it. So I wanted to focus very quickly on software as a service. I mean, clearly it's mainly a do-it-yourself dashboard type environment. You pay a very small amount of money, you get a username, you might get some push email reporting, website access. In rare occasions, you get some more SMS-based alerting. It's classic software as a service. It's exactly what that is. And as a person who studied print journalism, I'm actually appalled by that term. I don't actually believe that software can serve you. I think it can provide you with data, but can it actually serve you? I don't know, David might disagree coming from a technology background, but I generally find it difficult to cross that threshold and say software can provide at least a measurement service. It can give you bunches of data, if you will. But I don't genuinely believe that that model works when it comes to our customers. It's low cost. I mean, the green, as you can probably surmise, is the good parts about that. The red is the bad parts. It's low cost, unbelievably low cost. I mean, in my region, Meltwater will come and they'll offer Meltwater Buzz for $8,000 a year. If you pay in advance, you get a second year free. Why bother doing it? It's an easy sell. I mean, when you have that kind of very aggressive pricing and you've got a good-looking dashboard with good colors and good-looking charts and graphs, it's an easy sell. You think you're going to get what you need. It costs absolutely nothing. It's very quickly deployed. Just set it up overnight, and there you go. But it is of low value. The true insight that every customer looks for will not get that from software as a service. It's inflexible. If you want to add in different data types, because you're talking to a technology company, they have their own proprietary platform, they have their own way of doing things, and they're not particularly flexible when it comes to actually plugging in more data and so on. They're trying, and in some cases, when it comes to very basic data, they are succeeding. But by and large, are they capable of genuinely putting together full integrated solutions on data and measurement? I would argue, no, they're not capable of doing that. And then, of course, we've got limited service. Back to my region and back to and I'm not picking on Meltwater. I think they're an admirable company. And if you love software as a service, then they can be your hero, but they're not my hero. They have 18 people out of the Dubai office. They have a general manager, they have an accountant, and they have 16 salespeople. There's not one customer service person. There's no human analysis, and that's why they end up finding real problems, very low retention. When they first came into our market, they swept a large number of clients. And I can say with transparency, we lost 7% of our customers to Meltwater in their first year of operation in the Middle East. Conservatively, I would say we've gotten back between 98 and 99% of them over that 1 or 2 year period. but they have terrible retention. It goes to show that our customers who want media analysis and media insight, they want service. They want a person to talk to them. They want someone to think with them. They don't want to talk to a machine. They may appreciate the machine for giving information which may be useful, but that's not what they're paying for. Minimal insight, maturing clients. The clients are saying, you know what, I've used that Meltwater platform. Yeah, it has its uses, but I'm a communications professional. I'm a PR professional. This doesn't work for me. So clients are no longer falling into the trap of, oh, it looks good, it's cheap, I can deploy it quickly. They're getting over that. In fact, for the most part, they have gotten over that. You still have parts of the world where, you know, if you have a management team who want just very general information and are willing to pay for an enhanced version of Google Alerts, well, yeah, fine. You might still have a bit of a market over there. But is that business model even sustainable? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It might sound like a bit of an aggressive statement. I don't think I'm an aggressive person by nature, but I don't actually see that business model being sustainable in the long run. They clearly have lower market share, and they're getting lower revenue. I think they've clearly crossed their threshold, and they are in clear decline, as far as I can see. Francois, would you agree with that?
We agree with this.
Okay. So that's one of the two main models which are currently prevalent when it comes to social media measurement in our region, across the world, actually. The hybrid, or automation and human analysis model. It includes automation, no doubt about it, filtering, semi-automated filtering, automated filtering, and then, of course, human analysis. I think all of us know how this works. I think many of us in the room have that kind of structure currently operating in one form or another. It basically involves us using 1 or 2 or 3, or in my case, 8 different social media platforms, trying to tie them all in together, taking the data that we need, and finding some smart technology people, sometimes we find them, sometimes we don't, to be able to take all of that data, eliminate the clutter, and to eliminate duplicates, and come out with the broadest set of data that we possibly can. But then to filter it down effectively to the point that we can have a group of smart, genuine career analysts to go through that data manually and to come up with the kind of insight that the customer will, in fact, appreciate. Companies like Brandtology, Brandwatch, Social Eyes. I mean, would Metrica kind of fit into that approach now, Richard? Or it will? Okay, fine. So, what are the advantages of that model? It's a moderate cost. It's not as cheap as Radian 6 and Meltwater and all of that. It is more expensive, but it's still not particularly prohibitive from a cost point of view. It's a moderate sell. It's, you can't just sell it overnight. I mean, you can't do what Meltwater does in my region, put 16 people in sales, hitting the phone 150 times a day, and getting a 10 or 15% conversion rate. You do actually need to make the effort to convince the client, to walk them through that, frequently give a trial, either on a low-cost basis or for free, and so on. But you do get very good insight. I mean, the data coming out of that model is not a joke. It's not the kind of thing that you can simply dismiss. If you get data from that model, that data is real. It does have value. It's flexible. We can take in data from different sources. We can talk to different people. We can communicate with our data partners around the world, and so on. So we have a lot of advantages that the software as a service model simply doesn't have. We have a growing client base, and it's a higher barrier to entry. Not anybody can simply pop into that business. If you're doing the technology or software as a service model only, actually there are a ton of companies who can put together good search technology, good tagging and indexing technology, and get into that market. It might cost a little bit in the beginning, but there isn't that high of a barrier to entry. But tell somebody, put together a company which has a very good technology background, which has a very thorough understanding of communications, which has analysts who are capable of being able to combine media content and opinion data and report to a client regularly and without fail with insight that counts. Of course, it can be done. Anything can be done. But that is a knowledge set which, let's face it, if there were millions of people in the world, the average AMAC FEBEP conference would have 1,000 people, not 100 or 200 people. So this isn't a huge industry worldwide. I mean, I look around the room, and now having been part of this industry for roughly 11 or 12 years, you know, I feel like I'm at home, effectively. I feel like I'm at home. I look at everyone in this room, and we are really part of one small family. Why did we get into this business? So that's a different workshop. Some of the problems, and I know that by putting a lot of red, it might seem a little bit pessimistic or alarm sounding. I don't mean to be like that, but I do mean to focus on what the challenges we have are in order to go to that fifth new business model which I'm going to propose today. And that's why I want to go into the negative parts of what we are currently doing, what I believe to be the more successful and up-and-coming model is, in order to address what these problems are and hopefully make a good argument for what the next generation business model for social media measurement will in fact be. Okay. Any questions so far? Feel free to interrupt. I mean, I've got, I think, an hour and a half to kill. So
How has it been with the argumentation towards the clients in your hybrid case?
how is the?
Sending argumentation, what type of argumentation you use towards this SaaS model?
Well, against it, you mean?
Against it,
Against
yeah.
it. Well, I think number one, if I were to, I'd simply take that slide and read it.
Okay.
But I would say it's, in fact, of low value.
Yeah.
You know, the value of the information that you're getting, I don't say it's no value, but it is low value. You're not getting genuine communications and analytical insight from software as a service. And that's ultimately what we're here for. You know, so the raison d'etre of our industry is not being fulfilled by that business model.
Yeah.
And that's a very compelling argument to make. Then the lack of flexibility, lack of customer service, being very technology-driven, very price-driven, not insight-driven, means that sooner or later the customer will mature and will decide, you know what, I've tried it. It kind of gave me an idea about what this is all about. Maybe in 2020, technology will be capable of giving us what they're promising to do. But right now, it does not. So I actually find it pretty damn easy to argue against a software as a service model. And then there are many technical details which come after that. That the client will sign up, they'll get 500, 5,000, 500,000 results per day, and they're like, how am I going to read this stuff? I just don't have the time, I don't have the inclination. And by the way, somebody else tells me there's another 500,000 that it didn't pick up. And I just don't have the time to talk and teach you about what I want. You need to deliver on what you promised to give me. Comprehensive data, which is meaningful. Software as a service model is not comprehensive in the data, and it is not meaningful. Is there anyone here who comes from that business model's background? Is there anyone from Radian 6 or Alterian or SM2? Google? Okay. No offense taken. I mean. Okay. So what are the challenges of what is at the heart of our business model? I'd say number one, incomplete data. Go onto any platform you want. I have seen them all. I have tried them all. I've operated with as many of them as I possibly could. I think I have a pretty good grasp of everything that's out there. There may be a few that I'm not aware of, but I would argue that there is no one platform that gives you comprehensive social media data. And I would argue that the rate of incomplete data, even at the best platform, is in excess of 80%. Not 10 or 20 or 40 or 50. I would argue it is in excess of 80%. Now, many of us are coming from a traditional media monitoring background. We all know what happens when you miss one clipping. Just one. Imagine if you went to the client and said, you know what, to be transparent, we actually miss 80% of your coverage. It wouldn't be good. But that's the truth. That's why we use 8 different platforms, and that's why I believe we have a significant challenge when it comes to talking to the client about what kind of data they are actually getting. Now, you could be smart and you could be honest, and they usually are the same thing, being smart and being honest, and tell the client up front, that's the data pool that I actually have. That's the universe of data that I know I actually have. And if you feel that's a good pool of data for you, then I'll be happy to do some analysis on that basis. But if your business development or customer relation people are going out there saying, oh, we'll do the whole social media for you, it's simply not true. Yes?
Mazen, as we all know, Twitter is... Yes,
We can hear you.
yes, you might know me. I'm Joachim from FIBEB. Most of the social media data are on Twitter. It's about 2/3. Probably it's the same in your region. Probably it's a majority.
Okay.
On Twitter, it's much more, the percentage. If you tell the client on Twitter, the main media, we are much deeper.
Right.
You get better with your credibility, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree that, and that was my earlier point a moment ago, that if you're honest with the client and say, that's the data that I can get you, I can monitor Twitter and Facebook for you, and I can do that with a much higher accuracy rate, then that is the better approach to go. But I wouldn't necessarily agree that Twitter is 2/3 or a big chunk of social media. I think the latest number was 200 million people on Twitter. I don't remember. I think it was between 180 million and 200 million people. But I think it's pronounced Weibo in China. Has like 500 million people on it. I know that in my part of the world, across a lot of Africa, the Middle East, Central Asia, most social media activity actually happens on blogs, not on microblogs like Twitter. So the world has different preferences when it comes to social media data, and that's something that the 1045 panel will be discussing. But don't assume that Twitter or Facebook, because they're big here, for example, are big worldwide. They are big worldwide, but they are in fact much bigger things. They just don't necessarily happen to be the main thing over here. But the main point is one that I agree with completely. Let's all be honest with the client and say what data we have, as opposed to promising the world. So incomplete data is one issue. I've got missing data. Are they different? Yes, they are different. You can get missing data from the data pool that you already have. So you have access to a certain amount of conversations. You might be picking up 500,000 conversations per day. But even within that 500,000 that you have captured, the amount of missing data is extraordinary, for a whole variety of reasons. We don't need to do a technical workshop right now, but that is a simple fact. Part of the reason is language problems. In a world where many customers, especially on a measurement level, are increasingly regional or global, you can't do everything in a Latin root language. Try doing it in my region where people are writing Arabic in Latin letters. It's crazy. Try doing it with a South Sudan accent and in Latin letters, and so on. So the language issue is in fact a major issue. It's a major problem. And a lot of the technology providers who envisioned a lot of the capture data and the capture platforms, they might have academically thought about it, but they didn't actually build in the solutions. So there is a major gap when it comes to languages. I think the issue of specialization is another major issue, and I'll tie that into the business model towards the end. That's having people who are specialized in different areas of practice. I believe that the social media enterprise, a company which has social media embedded, not just our measurement and analysis companies, but your BMWs, your Procter & Gamble's, and so on, a social media enterprise should have social media embedded in every department, at every level of management. It's not only a communications tool, it's certainly not only a customer tool, and we all know that. It is an enterprise-wide enabler. And in order for people in the new measurement industry to be able to meet all of those needs effectively, when in 5 years' time, every company will be social media ready and will become a social media enterprise, you can no longer have someone who's just a social media analyst. You're going to have a social media expert in HR. You're going to have a social media measurement expert in investor relations. You're going to have a social media measurement expert in CEO reporting. So that issue of specialization is in fact one that carries on from our current traditional media analysis business. But I mean, don't be ashamed if you don't have 50 people and 30 different specialized teams. How many people in the room today within your company actually have specialized teams per industry, like for automotive or for aviation or technology? Metrica, okay, Athene, Kantar, okay. Now, let's take that one step further. How many of us have specialized teams per reporting structure, as in for the HR department or the IR department or the C-level suite? Well, the first set of responses was perhaps 10% of the people in the room. Second was much less. Are we wrong in assuming that the HR manager really needs social media to do their work? Does anyone feel that an HR manager at a group level, a department level, does not need social media? Of course they need social media. It's an elementary question. Of course they need social media. Why? You need to make sure you know what your employees are up to. You want to build a good internal team. You want to make sure that your confidentiality at your company isn't being broken. So social media is absolutely essential to an HR manager. Do you think the HR manager is going to go on to Radian 6 and go through 50,000 conversations of what's going on at General Motors in Detroit? No. Who are they going to come to? They're either going to build something in-house, or they're going to outsource, or they're going to have a hybrid of both. We, as an industry, have a role in that. And we need to be ready to be specialized, not only on an industry level, but on a reporting, on a departmental reporting level as well. So, measurement integration. I stand guilty of having created a company focused only on social media. I have another company within my group focused only on traditional media analysis. One's called Salience, one's called Socialize. Every day I walk into the office and I walk by their two different departments and I look at them and I think, are they doing the same thing? And I think about that and I wonder whether I made a mistake. I think in the early days, we got it absolutely right because we're continuing to live in the age of social media euphoria. In the mind of the client, social media is a different thing. And it has a different buyer. It's not only the comms people, it's the marketing people and so on who are buying social media services. But we're at the beginning of the end of that euphoria. The euphoria is not over. I think it'll take another full 18 months, maybe 2 years before that euphoria is over. But it is going to end. And at that stage, I'm going to ask myself, can I really go to a smarter, better educated, more mature client and say, I'll measure your social media data independently of your traditional data? And the answer is absolutely not. And I know that some of us are, in fact, working on some levels of integration. We're starting to put a few bits of data together. But let's face it, I mean, to what extent have we really done that? I think in some projects we've gone very far, and hopefully during the awards tonight or tomorrow, we'll find some really good examples of genuine integration of all source data, all source measurement. But I wonder how many of us are doing that, Richard.
It's interesting from the hi, I'm Richard. It's interesting from the barometer findings that Peter Granite took us through. I don't know how many people in the room were on that webinar. We're on the webinar last week, which Peter Granite took us through with the highlights. 50%, I think it was, from memory, of AMEC members were now breaking their social media out into specialist teams.
Right.
And Peter was talking about, of course, we need different tools, different skill sets, different language, that kind of stuff to do it. But on the one hand, there's that need, but on the other hand, there is, of course, the need to measure in an integrated way. So I think there's two conflicting pressures that the industry faces. Sure. So I'd agree with what you're saying, but just to throw that
no, it's a great point.
It's
absolutely a great point. And it comes back to this whole issue of convergence versus divergence. You know, everyone keeps on talking about everything converging, being put into a single blender. You know, we want all of our technology, all of our services under one name. You know, I actually believe the human mind is more geared towards divergence, not convergence. And that's why for us, when we have a company focused on social media only and a company focused on traditional media, we have one kitchen, effectively. They're one group of employees in one company under two different names. But in the mind of the client, they are in fact two different things. But what I believe is happening now is a rare instance of successful convergence. I'm very anti-convergence myself. But I think this is going to be a rare example of real convergence happening and putting certain pressures on us, which are going to be irresistible. But as we go into more detail on that new model, I address a few of those points. Asim.
Hi. I think we come from a background of traditional media measurement. Therefore, when we look at measurement, we have a certain understanding of measurement and the client.
Right.
I think now with social media, we need to broaden that client base or the requirement. Yeah. And I think this is one of the fundamental questions that I hear you raise today, which is that we need to start looking beyond the PR team in a organization. Right. And I need to look at different stakeholders to see whether I can meet the requirement or not. Yeah. I think that's one very important point that I picked up today. Second thing, with social media, the response element is also becoming very, very important. Whereas in traditional media, we would typically leave that for a PR professional to do and say, oh, this is not my domain, he will help you. I'm not very clear whether with social media, what is the way we are approaching or thinking about this issue.
Yeah. It's an excellent point and an excellent question. And to be honest, I don't think anybody has the right answer yet. I think it's just going to play itself out over time. What I do believe is that you're going to end up with a social media enterprise at most successful companies worldwide over the next 2 to 5 years' time. How will they be served? I think you might even have a social media consultancy focused on social media for HR. I actually believe it can go down to that level. But will there be a superpower, a WPP of social media services, or like the Kantar business model, which has for field research, communications research, advertising intelligence, different practices? Will you have that super company with all-encompassing services? The answer is probably yes. But I wouldn't put it beyond us to say you might have a 5-man company focused only on social media measurement and consulting for HR only. I think we could end up going down to that level.
But then are we not essentially questioning our basic belief that we started with? And actually then we are asking a very, very large question. Yes. We really need to be aware of and seriously think about it and therefore develop capabilities going forward.
It is an earth-shaking issue. I completely agree. And that's why what we're talking about today, not just for my ego, is far more exciting than what's going on in the other room, because this is going to transform everything about who we are. And I don't think we can say no. I think we're going to find ourselves looking at an entirely new client market, playing on a much bigger field. And while that might be a little bit scary, I actually find it full of opportunity and very exciting.
And therefore, just one more point I want to add. In my country, I find maximum competition not from the SaaS companies, not from the PR companies. I find competition in the form of digital marketing companies. So suddenly I'm up against people who already are very large and now getting into this domain and advising clients on what to do once they have seen what's happening.
Another very good point. I think they will be a competitor to who we are going to become, but we do have an advantage. We come from an analytical background. They don't. They're much more consulting, marketing driven. But where does that intersection between consulting and marketing happen? Between analysis and consulting happen? That's another gray area. But a lot of these things I'll get to in a moment, but they are absolutely very important points, and I will reiterate your main point. We are about to see complete shift, a complete transformation in who we are. In fact, let me put on my FIBE president hat for a moment. That's what we're going to be talking about in Krakow in October. The old press clipping model and even the old, I believe, traditional media analysis model is never going to go away. The human condition loves to say, it's all over. But it is radically shifting to a new thing. What that new thing will be, we need to define it and we need to capture it and not let others define us and our work moving into the future. I know that Ben had a question and then my good old friend from Russia, Ben.
I didn't have much of a question. I was actually going to start a discussion. Well, because the central thing that we're looking at here is that we need to move away from a content-centric model to a client-centric model. And that's why ultimately the need and the use of the data is what's going to determine the next model. So if
Hold
HR
that
has
thought.
a different...
Hold that thought and we'll get, I'm with you, 100% with you, and we'll get to that in a moment.
Thank you,
Okay.
Martin.
Thank you.
Evgeny Xlibris. I just want to add some things to the point of you of Asim about the marketing departments and other departments, as you said, that we need to go to work with different other divisions besides PR, and from one point of view we have a competition from marketing agencies.
Right.
From the other point we see that our clients really need social research in, for example, HR, security departments, marketing departments, and we need to think how our products can help them to with these things.
So we're all going to be looking at a flurry of new product development and innovation over the next year or two. So, I mean, these are some of the main issues which we're talking about in terms of challenges within our industry. We talked about incomplete data, missing data, language challenges, the problem of specialization, integration. But those are things which I believe are slowing our growth. We could and should have been far ahead as an industry right now than we currently are. The wrong data is leading to mistaken actions. Now, we always hear about all of the success stories about someone who looked at a particular data set of social media and how it really helped them and they communicated far more effectively. And that's all fine. There's a lot of truth in that. But shouldn't we as good researchers actually say, well, is there another side to that coin? There is another side to that coin. The wrong decisions that have been taken because of the wrong data that is being provided. And there are horror stories on a commercial level or on a political level. You know, I can tell you that on a political level, someone like the presidency of Hosni Mubarak in Egypt thought they had social media very well analyzed and that the country was with them. Look at where the guy is today. Okay. You know, on a commercial level, there are certain areas where you find different organizations which have taken important brand and reputational decisions on that incomplete data or on the missing data, and it has ended up leading to a decline in their ability to reach out to their customers. So it's not an academic thing. There are horror stories out there which do need to be studied. And while we often talk about the success stories in conferences like this, it is important to actually look at the failures when it comes to the usage of social media.
I want to add a challenge here. The biggest
Yes.
challenge that I face in the hybrid approach is the speed of turnaround.
Right.
And I think that is where at times we tend to lose out in comparison to automated sentiment analysis tools or other NLP
Yes.
stuff.
I completely agree. Okay. So the need to change, despite the growth in the hybrid model, clients are getting smarter. They are demanding more. Questions continue to grow on social media data integrity. I think the number of customers saying, where did you get that data from? How do I know it is complete? That's really an important, how do I know it's complete? My grandmother was doing her hair at the salon and she was going onto social media and she saw your name. Why didn't you give it to me? Similar problems that we heard in the traditional media monitoring business and traditional media analysis business in the past. But the integrity of data has always been and will continue to be a growing issue. Large and unacceptable gaps are being identified by clients. And the fact that we are far more global means that we need to have that cultural, specialized way of doing things and a strong language base. Am I exaggerating these fears? I mean, I think hearing the comments from the room so far, the answer is no. But the main point I want to make is by having those issues, what we are really missing out on for our customers isn't missing data or missing information. It's missing and lost relationships. It's being able to capture, to analyze, and to engage on those relationships as a whole. And when we are missing out on those relationships, we are losing the focus of why we exist as communications professionals. I mean, think about that statement for a moment. A missing relationship, a lost relationship, because we didn't have the right data, or the data was incomplete, or we didn't know how to read the language, leads to a lost or missing relationship. And then partially misleading information, completely misleading information can lead to absolutely wrong communications activity, which, as I mentioned, less credibility, less revenue, less market share, and all of the other problems which we simply want to avoid. Before I move on, Florian, you had a question.
What was the detail?
It was a detail, all right. Well, the good times will not last. We are living in that age of the social media euphoria that I mentioned and that we all know about. But if we were to go back to the previous slide and look at the far right, doesn't that remind you of something? I can actually hear Katie Payne just popping up right now saying, AVEs are awful, AVEs are awful. Well, you know what? If we do not change, we are going to recreate, not AVEs, we're going to recreate the culture of AVEs. Providing data just for the hell of it, just because we have a number, which clients seem to accept. But everyone knows it's low value. Everyone knows it's low credibility. People will not pay for it. And ultimately, we will recreate that culture of mediocrity, which AVEs has been the king of for the past 50 years. Now you can make your statement. Yeah. I mean, by a show of hands, I'm just curious to know whether the argument that I've put forward so far is absolute rubbish or if there's a little bit of truth to it. Who agrees with that statement? Put your hand up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Philip, I'll count you in my camp. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. 33. 34. Who does not agree with that statement?
Mazen, Phil from Cantor. I agree in principle with what you're suggesting there, but thanks, Donal. So I agree with the principle and the general tenet of what you're saying, but part of the issue with AVEs is that it's become, those that defend it would say it's a universal metric, it's understood, everyone, it translates across borders.
Right.
Of course, there is no one metric within social that's being advanced as offering anything like a single point of explanation or articulation of value. And for that reason, I think, so I agree with the tenet, but I don't think we're heading towards where there will be a single irrelevant point, because we actually don't have any point at all that people agree on as an articulation of value in social. And so that's really where the threat is, that we will not have a definition of value, which is almost as bad as having a definition of value that is just plainly worthless.
Right. Well, I take that as an agreement with me, but it's a very eloquently said statement, and I do agree with you. And I'm not trying to make a statement that it is a point of value or a point of definition. As much as I'm saying we are talking about the culture of social media measurement as one being adequate and useful in its current form today, but one that in a very short period of time will no longer be adequate and will be far less useful, and we will be back to the points which we often discuss in a way similar to, in an equivalent way to AVEs. So I'm not really drawing a comparison with the actual scientific metric or the point of definition, as much as I am with the culture of mediocrity, which everybody can easily latch onto and say, I'm a social media analyst. So it was 34-0. Did anyone feel neutral about it? Okay. Yes, one. Please go ahead. Share with us.
Still not decided.
Undecided. Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so it's 34-0-1. We'd win the Bundesliga. Yes.
I would like to add something to what Phil said, because I understood your AVE comparison as the cultural, philosophical comparison. And I think in the marketplace, if anyone could offer anything as precise as print media AV is in social media, he would get very rich, because everybody on the client side is searching for it hand-wringingly that you have something like AVEs. So if you would have something like that, it would be better than not having it, but still it wouldn't make any point, because there is at least something, even if it's not precise and even if it had low value, but we at least have something. So I think we're in print, we have AVEs, we're one step further than in social media, where we don't have anything at all, but we don't even have circulations, which is one step further as well. But we don't have something that gives us real insight, because AVs don't give real insight and circulation don't give real insight. So I think the point is how to make the big step with social media ahead of AVs and circulation.
And let's hope on that point and on Philip's point that tomorrow, when are we having the declaration tomorrow?
Yes, and there's a social media big session on Friday morning where a lot of these questions are going to be addressed.
So hopefully in the next day or two, we're going to leave Dublin with an official declaration of agreed upon. I think we're going to vote on it like Barcelona.
Tomorrow we do a vote. I think Dave Brockman's doing that, and then on Friday the coalition, social media coalition, will be reporting back on what we've been doing over the last year.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll leave Dublin with a robust set of social media standards. I've seen quite a few of them being developed. I tend to agree with most of them, but let's see what they are, and let's see how the vote comes out.
I think the big problem that we're worrying about here is that we're all focusing on metrics which are outputs, and we need to shift the whole industry onto focusing on metrics that are outcomes, and perhaps this is where your model might be going. But the problem with the output metrics that we've got is, A, we all know that output metrics aren't very good, but B, in this social media environment, they're not reliable numbers either. So it's a double whammy, which means that we all really have to start to move away from accepting them.
I agree. Evgeny.
I completely agree with Martin and Richard. I just want to add that social media measurement is a fast-growing market, and we see a lot of different metrics, parameters that are just coming from everywhere. And what we need as a association, we need to make the standards in social media measurement, just to avoid this culture of AVE as we had in traditional media.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think one of the most important things coming out is that we actually, this is Anne from Media Measurement, is that we actually come out with something that we can go away and actually use and not continue just thinking, well, okay, that sounds like a good idea and perhaps we could. I just think that now is the moment in time, as other people have said, that we have to come away from this summit, and that's a challenge to you.
And we have to, absolutely.
We have to.
Yeah,
I
it's
can't
not
go
an option.
back and say we haven't got a standard.
Right.
And I'm very pleased to say that without any premature announcements, that there are 3 things that will be distributed on Friday morning, which are things that we can go away and use. There is a big issue about standards, though, and standards can, I think, at the moment overcomplicate things, because a lot of the academics in the industry want standards to be rigorously approved and tested, and that takes a lot of time, a lot of debate, a lot of argument, and we are a way away from them. But certainly principles that we can agree on as an industry, and some frameworks, guidance and document stuff that we can all use and share with our client base will be forthcoming on Friday morning. So nobody drink too much on Thursday night, and make sure you're there.
Indeed. Okay.
You talked about output measurement and outcome measurement. I totally agree with you that outcome measurement is far more important than output measurement. But I fear that somewhere we have started to discount the value that output measurement brings to a project. Yes, outcome measurement is over and above that, but we should not start to discount the value of output measurement, because for several projects wherein the budgets are not there or there are other limitations, output measurement really helps.
It is a good point. I think because we're starting to run ahead and there are a few more slides, why don't we just, we'll hold that thought for a moment and we'll continue. Okay, so what is the sort of next generation business model for social media measurement that I'm proposing? I would call it the engagement-driven model. Okay. And Ben, what was the word that you said a moment ago? It needs to be client-driven. I'm expanding upon that, and I'm calling it being engagement-driven. And I'm going to even expand upon that further by saying in the past, we used to be data-driven. We always talked about being data-driven people, data-driven analysts, data-driven organizations. And I think the next evolution of that is going from being data-driven to being engagement-driven, where we do not discount or get rid of the data-driven advantages that we have always had and should continue with, but it's making sure that the other main issues of engagement, such as a premium on emotional intelligence, a focus on cultural norms as a key business tool, focus on specialized practices and specialization in areas of management. Predictive analysis, I think, is extremely important. And I'm not talking about game theory, which has, I think, been, thanks to the Iraq War, completely debunked. And I call it the engagement blend, emotions, culture, prediction, interaction, all being done in real time. That is the next generation model that we're looking at. So are we all doomed in what we're doing? No. But are we all going to change? I would say yes. Are we all going to transform into PR companies? I'd say no. But some of us have already transformed into communications consultancies and using analysis and measurement as a foundation for their work. But they are, in fact, working and competing against PR organizations. What are we going to become? I think for most of us who are successful, we are going to become providers of engagement analytics. And that includes all of the engagement-driven metrics which we talked about a moment ago, mastering all of the different emotional, cultural, and technological challenges that come with it. And I think for the best, we're going to be able to get that very delicate balance of being able not to cross the line into communications activity, but to provide thought leadership, planning, and what we all know as consulting. But the consulting word might be misinterpreted as being too big. But I'm taking engagement consulting as being able to identify and to react to data in an analytical manner. And that's where the fine balance is, to react in an analytical manner. And that's a hard thing to do. But I'll give you a quick idea of how we're doing it back in my area, in the Middle East. We started Socialize as a social media monitoring company. We licensed the Alterian dashboard. It was all right. We needed more. We licensed a few more. We ended up having 8 different platforms which we are using for social media data and creating filtration tools to have all of that put into one single new platform, the Socialize platform. Then we built Arabic language modules, Persian language modules, and a whole bunch of other things. Our clients started appreciating the fact that we gave them more and more information. All along, we were sitting down thinking the PR companies are going to dominate this. It's just a dream for a PR company because social media is eminently the domain of public relations. It is not eminently the domain of advertising. Social media is meant to be people-driven and credibility-driven, not payment-driven and advertising-driven. So I've always believed it is eminently the domain of public relations. But public relations companies are not really catching on to it and dominating that area the way I thought they would. There are some who are doing a very, very good job, but they're a very small number. So what's happening back in the Middle East is we are becoming the PR of social media. And after having done the monitoring and done the analysis and started doing weekly and daily and monthly PowerPoints based on millions of social media conversations, we were in the unusual position of the biggest telecom operator in the region and the third largest worldwide come to us and say, you know what, we've tried everything. We've tried social media specialists out of the UK, we've tried PR companies in the region, we've tried global PR companies. They're just they're not getting it done. And our negativity rates, our negativity sentiment is just out of control. Why don't you give it a shot? Now, this would not have happened if I hadn't retired from public relations in 1999 and the communications manager worked on the news desk with me. I retired from PR in 99 because I woke up one day and said, if I can make other people rich and famous, why don't I do that for myself? Okay. So in 1999, I was working with this young man who was my colleague. He was a newspaper reporter. And over the last decade or more, he joined PR and became a senior person. He said, let's try it out for 3 months. And we did. And now we have, believe it or not, us who started off in press clipping, a 14-man secondment to this telecom company, doing all of their monitoring, analysis, and engagement in-house at the premises of the telco company. Now, did I ever believe when we started our company in 2002 that I would be forced out of retirement and actually have to think about public relations once again? I never thought that would happen. And that goes directly to your point, Asim. I never envisioned ever having to think in communications execution and communications planning terms ever again. But we had to do it. We couldn't have our people sitting down at the client premises, capturing social media conversation, analyzing them, and waiting for a day to get an approval to respond. From a purely practical point of view, unless you have the client sat down right there next to you, someone needs to see a very bad alert. I hate your brand and I'm going to throw a bomb into your window. You can't just say, client, I've got an alert for you. When are you going to give me an approval to react? You have to react. And that's why we've been pushed into that area. So the fine balance that we are currently trying to do is we are taking their social media people, we are training them, we are deploying them, and they are in fact now sitting down side by side with our socialized people in the premises of the client. But the problem is they simply can't get the ability to do the monitoring part, the analysis part. They're getting better at doing the engagement part. But even then, they need the data. And they need to plan and they need to react analytically. I think the line between engagement and analysis is blurring very quickly. And at some point, it may disappear altogether. Where does that leave us? It's a tough question. Now, if you're going to be looking at a monthly report, a weekly report, trend data, then you can sit comfortably in the social media measurement space knowing that you're not going to get into communications. But for the best of us, there is an opportunity here. The advertising companies aren't doing it. The digital marketing people don't know what the hell they're talking about. Digital marketing, for God's sakes. You know, the PR people who should dominate the space are not dominating the space. There is a big opportunity here for us to be engagement consultants. I'm not going to take a vote on that one. Okay. So, what do you think that big blue circle is over there? When you look at that, what would you think that is all about?
Capability.
Capability, that's a good point. What else? It's like an organizational chart, isn't it? A little bit more fluid. But when I look at that, I see the organizational chart of my company. Now, it might not be fully advanced in every box, but that is the organizational chart of my new company. It started off way down there at the bottom left. Data capture, filter, and analysis. That's who we used to be 18 months ago. And we need to improve, there's no doubt about it. But that telecommunications example that I mentioned a moment ago is forcing my company to hire linguistics professionals. We're being forced to do it. We have no option. To deploy much better natural language processing tools. We have to do it. It's not an option. We have to hire and retrain the current people who we have to become far more culturally aware of their surroundings, politically, economically, environmentally, and so on. We can no longer depend on a 24-year-old right out of college who can count a bunch of numbers and put them on PowerPoint. It doesn't work anymore. As I mentioned, it will work for a short period of time, but the clock is ticking on that. We need to be able to train that team again on specialist practices. I want someone who knows to speak the language of an HR director. I want someone who knows how to talk to a vice president of internal relations or investor relations. Do we have all of that? No. We have the structure, and we're building up. It might be 10 years before we reach the point where I'll be happy. We might never even get there. But I have no doubt in my mind that that is who we have to be, and that's who we are becoming. I think the most difficult thing that we need to build up are having what I call sort of the engagement masters, if you will, the people who can tie it all in together. Because when you have the linguistic professional, the cultural awareness across your team, specialized practice areas, and so on, you still need the kind of leadership, operational management, to be able to tie all of that in together. And I think these are going to be the hardest people to build up, to train, and to deploy. It's just not a joke, because that level of human intelligence and human capability is really difficult to nurture. It's almost impossible to hire. It's almost like in America, in baseball, you need to put people in what they call the farm system, where they need to play baseball for 5 years in the minor leagues before they even have the opportunity to go to the major leagues. That's the way we're going to become. I see no other alternative. I mean, I'm happy to take comments. I mean, when you look at that, do you see your future, or do you think that's a load of rubbish again? You agree? Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? That corner of the room has been a little bit quiet. I know, Christian, you're not measuring every day, but you're helping us measure. When you look at that, do you think, oh my God, I need to change everything I've ever done?
You know that I'm looking at it from a purely technical standpoint of view, and when it comes to engagement, one question comes up to in my mind. We want to talk about engagement of human beings, but not about the engagement of machines. When it comes to social media monitoring, we need to know that a lot, and nobody knows how many of these identities are fake identities or are machine created.
Right.
So when it comes to calculate any number in social media, you have to take away all these fake identities. Do you know how many? Do you have any clue how to get rid of them?
Sure.
Do they evolve faster than human beings, or are the machine created faster?
Excellent point. Excellent point. And that's why you're a hero within our industry, because you think up of this stuff and you find this technology solutions to take care of them.
I would be happy if I could.
But that is part of good engagement measurement, being able to filter out what's not relevant or proper data. And over there on the green, who's that? It's pretty obvious, really. It's the customer. It's the customer, but the customer isn't one little circle anymore on our organizational chart. We need to think of the customer within every unit that they define themselves with. HR, comms, marketing, finance, product development, innovation, the C-suite, and so on. Let them decide who they want to be in the way that they want to be. But we need to deliver all of that in blue in a way that is unique and custom to each department as well as a whole. That's the way I see the future. That's business model number 5. And if you want to do what we're doing, you're going to add an engagement team. One which is likely, the colors are pretty clever, a little bit of a hybrid between you and the client. So I believe that slide before is who we are all going to end up being. And this slide over here is what I hope that, and I aspire for my company to be. And it's a structure that we're in fact following at the moment. It's still in its infancy. We have only 5 clients who are currently in that operational structure out of about 120 within our social media company, but they account, what % of our revenue do you think they account for? We have 120 clients, 5 of them are following that model. The rest are using the hybrid model, mainly the hybrid model. But those 5 clients, what % of our revenue do you think they contribute? Take a guess. 35, 50, 40, 40%. 5 clients contribute 40% of our revenue. The other 115 or so are your $1,000 a month, $3,000 a month. Throw up the dashboard, get the data, push email alerts, PowerPoint report at the end of each month. That's fine, nothing wrong with that.
And what percentage of resources are dedicated to those clients?
Good question. I'd say nearly half. Nearly half. It's almost a startup within the company. We'll have Asim, Gabi, and then Anne.
Aren't you afraid that being engaged with the client and giving him consultants, so for example, if you work with one telecom company, you won't be able to work with all the other ones, that nowadays when you're in the hybrid model, you can work with all of them.
Excellent
so how
point.
do you solve it?
Excellent point. That's, I think, something that needs to be left to each one of you. We've taken the decision that we're happy to sacrifice working with the entire industry to have engagement with one.
And you still work with all the rest with the hybrid model, or they told you since you're consulting to
believe
one
it or
of them?
not, we work with nearly all in our region on the hybrid model.
Even after you started?
Even after we started working with that one. But will that last? I don't think so, but you know what? I'm fine with that. I'd rather have one big telco at $500,000 a year than 5 at $2,000 a month each. And if you don't want to take that risk, I mean, the risk I'm willing to take is to have my company become an engagement consultancy. If you don't want to take that risk, you can be an engagement analytics company. But that's something that each one of you needs to decide for yourself. So, I mean, it's all about repositioning, isn't it? It's all about rebranding, finding out who we want to be, where we're going to go. You know, do we compete with PR agencies? Do we not? But before we get to that, Anne, you had a question.
Yes, I was just going to ask, how do you stop the silo effect with having each department having its own social media emphasis?
Internally or with the client?
What's the difference?
Well, they are pretty different. I mean, from our side, on the agency side, I would consider my company to be the agency.
Yeah.
We've taken the decision to unify all of our social media functions. So they're going to work together as one team. Okay? Now, if they have to buy or integrate data from other sources, they simply have to do it. They can't say, no, we won't, or we don't like to get traditional media. They simply will have to do it. I think the silo challenge really comes with the client side, where you might have the marketing manager has his budget, the HR manager has her budget, and each one of them might have a preference on how to do social media. The question is, can we talk to them as an enterprise? Ultimately, I don't believe that a big successful company or a small successful company can have 5 different social media strategies because it has 5 different departments. I believe ultimately CEOs are going to see and believe that they need a single unified social media strategy enterprise-wide. And that's why I call it a social media enterprise or a social media ready organization, where standards are set enterprise-wide, and then you have a provider or an in-house team who will custom report or custom shape each report to each department internally. Therefore, we have a unifying set of standards which breaks the silo mentality, but you have the customization to be able to report to every department in a way which suits that manager's need.
Okay. Yeah.
That answer your question?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Jochen.
It's a very interesting point you're addressing. On one side, we are saying we want to address to new, with new language, to new addressees within the companies. So we talk in another way to the PR, we talk in another way to the HR manager, another way to the marketing. And then on the other side, you're focusing on one strategy. Isn't that a contradiction? Actually, everybody is looking to find the right language to the specific client groups within the company.
Sure.
But isn't there a contradiction?
I think what we need to differentiate is having one standard for a company. But you might have a different strategy per department. So your strategy on reporting to the HR person might be different from the strategy for the comms person.
And it's another product.
It could be a different product, yeah. But the standards would need to be one. So the unification on an enterprise level will be through standards. But you could have a diversity of strategies because you have a diversity of internal stakeholders at your customer. Richard.
I guess the challenge is, as enterprises become the social media enterprise that you say they will, which I agree with, is as they do that, they have to think about how they're going to scale to the points, again, that you were making, to respond to comments in real time.
Right.
And there's a book called The Now Revolution, written by Jay Baer, which you may have read, and other people may have read, where Jay argues that it means we're going to have to change the whole sort of top-down control that you have in an organization. You have to empower everybody within the organization to have a voice and to respond and to speak out. And I guess my question, or the sort of potential flaw in this plan, is that sort of bullet point 4 here, building engagement teams is the client's job. Is this a short-term thing, in that at the moment the client doesn't know how to do it, so your team's having success and you know, full power to your elbow for that. But in 2 or 3 years' time, is this going to be sustainable, or is the social media enterprise of the future going to have these skills in its workforce, much like they have the ability to answer the phone and answer a question there?
Sure. I think every social media enterprise, client side, must have that skill set, and they will develop it over time. How much time, I really don't know. But during that time, it might be 1 year or 3 years or 5 years, maybe 10, there is an opening for us. And I'm going to take it. The question is, will they develop it to the point that they no longer need us? And the only thing that I can benchmark, Richard, would be the PR industry. Can the client side develop in-house PR to the point that they no longer need a PR agency? Yes, every single one of them can. How many of them actually take that step? Very few. Very few get rid of their PR agency. You know, they always have some kind of PR activity, even if it's on a project basis or on a retainer basis. Yeah. And they are in their business of building cars or selling plane tickets. They're not in the business of developing the technology, the strategy, and the engagement approach, which is needed, and where you have a hub of innovation at a company like yours or mine in order to do that. And therefore, I believe that by being focused on that, we will always have a strong and compelling reason to either work as an outsourced supplier or within a hybrid structure with the client. The hybrid team could be led by the client and operated partly by us and partly by their people. Yes?
I agree with the part of the analysis. I disagree with the part of the consultant. Because let's take these slides 10 or 15 years backwards and say, okay, so we're starting doing analysis for press and radio and television.
Good point.
Why didn't we do it 10 or 15 years ago with consulting on regular media?
Excellent point, yeah.
And I think since we didn't do it that, and we're still, all of us are here in the room,
Sure.
I'm not totally convinced why we should do it now.
I might not be able to convince you, Gabby, but I'll try to. The difference is the nature of the media. In the past, TV, radio, and print was one way. The client controlled everything. The media controlled everything. Now it's different. Now it's a two-way thing. The nature of media has changed. The nature of communications has changed to the point that the client no longer is in a position to look at a bunch of clippings and surmise their own strategy. Say, you know what, I can do whatever I want on my own. But even then, they still had PR agencies advising them. Now it's far more complicated because the rate of two-way communication is far greater than ever before. The clients cannot catch up. Very few will have the time or financial ability or resources to innovate, build, monitor, analyze, and engage the way that we can. So I think they're diametrically different, A, because of the type of media, and the media environment that has gone from a one-way to a two-way communications channel. And B, even when it was one-way only, they still hired PR people to give them advice on strategy and consulting. It just happens that the business model for consulting on social media is so intertwined with analysis that the line between is getting, as I mentioned earlier, thinner and thinner and thinner every day, and it may well disappear. I would argue that it has disappeared. Functionally, it has disappeared. When you're sitting down in that war room and you're talking with your customers or you're engaging with your stakeholders, you're looking to get trends and get ideas on new product innovation, and you need to react quickly, you're actually reacting on analysis. You're reacting on real live data. And of course on longer trend data. But you have to move right there and then. And the person who did the analysis is the person best equipped to do the reacting. Now you might have someone from the client side who will give guidelines and corporate objectives and what to do and how to do it. But will they have the ability to put 50 people in if you're a global Fortune 500 company? Maybe, maybe not. But not everyone's a global Fortune 500 company. They can't hire 50 people to do that for them. So I believe that there is a big opportunity still there. The nature of the media is a differentiating factor, and everyone always needs an outside consultant to help in order to get the best results on what they focus on. So I don't know if I've convinced you, but that's my argument.
In our part of the Middle East, I don't know how is it in your part, the digital companies are very, very strong. So what we do, we work closely with them. So for example, when there is a crisis with a telecom company, so we build up a war room and there is the representative of the digital marketing company and from us and from our company and from the client side. So in our model, we work more as analysis and information.
But it's real time, yeah? I mean, you're in the same room.
Yeah.
So practically, you're one team. Would you, as IFAT, buy one of these digital marketing companies?
I'm not sure because our focus on being the analysis and they're on bringing the content. So I think.
And when you're in that room, don't you often look at those people from the digital marketing company and think, gosh, I know so much more than you do. I can really help the client much more than you can.
Yeah, but I take less risk than that.
Okay. But that's my position. Okay. My position is that the nature of the media has changed so much. The line between analysis and reaction to it is almost completely vanished, if not completely gone. And that nobody else has picked up that space effectively. People are pretending, people are playing, people are trying, but it's clear that the skill set needed to engage and react properly starts with analysis. Evgeny.
Mazen, I would like to express a couple of concerns about the engagement at the client side. First is our past experience. We actually tried engagement teams like 1-2 years ago.
Right.
But you know, then we started to teach our client how to act in social media because actually it's if you want to do your best, then the engagement team should really live at the client. Because otherwise you cannot understand some process, some internal process, and that's why we decided not to create our own engagement teams, but to teach the client how to react. And this is one point of view. And the second concern is that it's hard to stay objective when you're doing two jobs, measurement and engagement.
Yeah.
So,
two absolutely excellent points. I mean, the first one, I think, doesn't necessarily contradict the approach which I'm proposing. Why? Because you don't need to do it on behalf of the client. You can simply consult with the client and help them build their own team. So that's a very viable model. I think it goes hand in hand with what I'm proposing. You don't always need to do it yourself. The client can do it on his own, and there is a big opportunity in training the client's people, building their team, and deploying their team to engage effectively. That is a valuable service, which is a chargeable service. So, you know, the nature of how you do it, the nature of how you consult, is up to you. It doesn't have to be an embedded team or an outsourced team. It can simply be build, operate, and transfer. In terms of the other point, and I was a contractor for Accenture for 2 years. And that happened just after Arthur Andersen collapsed. And I remember what we called the Andersen effect. Basically, you can't have your auditing and your consulting under one roof. And then the laws all came in and so on. And look where we are today. It's all back together again. Here, it's a little bit different. Here, you are analyzing in order to react because you have to react. Okay? As opposed to balancing the books and saying, I think you should do this. It's a different situation. So while I'm very conscious of the fact that you need to be able to have data integrity and consulting clearly delineated, in this particular industry, they are not delineated. It's unique. It's very different from your accountants or they're big four now, or are they now three? I forget. They seem to have one vanish every decade. But what used to be the big five, now I think they're the big four, Andersen and KPMG and PwC, I think their structure is very different to the one that we're in. And we actually went through that process and talked about it. We negotiated about it as a team, even with one of our clients. And he said, well, you've always been the one, Mazen, who said, keep your media monitoring on one side and your media analysis on one side. And I continue to believe in that. But when it comes to social, it's a different ballgame. I do not believe that we can pretend that there is a line differentiating between the two. The line is, in practical reality, simply not there. Okay. So I put a few questions up there on repositioning. How are we doing for time? 5 minutes to go. Is it viable to build a culture study center? I mean, can you create that kind of knowledge base in your company? I would say yes. How realistic is it to build multilingual capability and natural language processing tools? You don't need to do it on your own. You can buy it. That stuff is getting cheaper and cheaper year after year. Do we merge social media with traditional analysis and teams? I think that's a case-by-case situation, and so on. We are researchers, not communicators, is one that I've heard as well. Actually, if you don't know communications, how can you do communications research? You might not be the communicator, but you have to know communications to do communications research. It's not a bean counting exercise. It's a communications exercise. It's an evaluation of communications, planning of communications. So I believe we will have to reposition. I think there's a 3-year time frame. I think at that point, we reach the threshold where you're either going to fall behind fatally, or you're going to adapt enough in order to be able to move into the future successfully. Not all of us will go for an engagement-driven model. Some of us will be happy to continue with, social media measurement and giving a report once a month or once a week in PowerPoint format. That will always stick around, just like advertising value equivalence will always be around. That too will always be around. You'll just have a much smaller company with much smaller revenue, and you can take one holiday every 2 years, not every 6 months. Those who are doing consulting must be ready to recruit communications professionals. We might be headhunting from PR companies. How about that? You have to be ready to lose some agency business, as Gabby said. And there are other considerations. But I think the main point that I wanted to communicate today was one that we all know what the existing business models are. The people-driven model, the TweetDeck free platform model, software as a service model, the hybrid model. And many of these continue to succeed in small or large measure because of the euphoria, the global euphoria about social media and its novelty. But like with everything, that novelty is going to wear away. And the demands of more mature clients who are smarter, better educated, who have access to a lot of these free tools and they're running on their desktops and can compare their data sets to yours, their expectations are going to become more sophisticated and more advanced. Doesn't mean that their reporting has to be suddenly far more complex. This isn't a call for complexity, don't get me wrong. It's a call for real value, real insight, something that is worth buying if you are the client. And we have a number of choices. We can stay the way we are, and that will continue in perhaps a much more diminished manner. Or we can go to something beyond, what is that thing, I believe it is an engagement-driven model. A safe engagement-driven model is one of engagement analytics. I think it's pretty straightforward, it's non-controversial, and it's really one step of evolutionary process away or ahead of where we are today. But in order to make that succeed, you need to build the cultural, linguistic, and people power within that team and within that structure to do very well. A more risky model, and one which I would say is perhaps far more rewarding, is to look at engagement consulting. And even within engagement consulting, there are different degrees. You can consult only on the build, operate, transfer model. Or you can actually go ahead and embed your team within the client side. In fact, I've always wondered whether or not the PR agencies who are the bread and butter of our traditional media monitoring would rise up against us. For now anyway, for now at least 20 agencies are using us to help with their PR, with their engagement on their client side. So they haven't turned against us. Might they turn against us? Maybe they will. But as of now, a 20-man, 50-man, 80-man PR company simply cannot do what we're doing. So I think there's a very good case on that, but I would submit it is more risky. Whereas the engagement analytics model is pretty much a strong evolutionary step forward with its own set of requirements. That's pretty much what I'm proposing. I hope that it's been something to think about, whether you agreed or not. And I hope that you've enjoyed the first workshop of the summit. Thank you.